Sorry I'm late. I'm joined by my two colleagues, Richard Alicon and Greg Smith. Call the meeting to order. We have a couple of items on consent. Items 1 and 2.
And 3.
And 3. Does anybody want to have any discussion on those 3 items? There seems to be a public comment card on item number 1. So before we do anything, would you like to come up? Item number 1, Dan Sesharis and Sean, is that O'Connor? And would you read item number 1?
Item number 1, City Engineer Report relative to the vacation of the alley northerly of Riverside Drive between Ben Avenue and Gentry Avenue. Vacation number E1401046.
Do we have both Dan here and Sean here? Or
Yes, yes, sir. We're here. We're actually for the proposal, so
Okay.
if there's no objections, then we can sit down and be quiet.
Very good. Does anybody have any objections to item number 1?
Well, now that you opened
Do
it,
we have a motion?
Yeah, let's just keep going.
Do we have a motion on item number 1?
move to approve.
Mr. Alicon? Fine, so that's done. And item number 2 and item number 3, we have no papers, but they are on consent. Any comments, colleagues, on those two?
Moved.
So moved, he says. Mr. Smith? Mr. Alicon? And so be it. Those 3 are approved and done away with. Thank you, folks, for those 3. Motion, item number 4, I don't see any cards on it or anything.
Item number 4, motion, Smith Zion, relative to authorization to waive certain street improvement requirements under condition number S-3IC of the October 13, 2005 approval of track number 61332 in connection with Lot 29, a.k.a. the Oak Ridge Residence, located at 18650 Devonshire Street.
Great. Did staff come up on this? And Mr. Smith, since it's your motion, you might want to say something.
All I want to do is make sure that that it's contingent upon the city purchasing the lot 29, and that's stated in the file.
Any comment on that? City, you want to come up? Good afternoon. It's Paul Koretz in the room. Hello, Paul.
Good afternoon. My name is Edmund Yu from Public Works Engineering. My office had worked with Councilmember Smith's office on this one, so we agree with the requirement on this motion.
That, and also that we're not waiving it on the west of the driveway.
That's fine.
Very good. Okay.
Okay, 2 questions real quick. Is the property currently on the market for sale? And if so, what is the sales price? Am I right on that?
Yeah, it's $1.6 million. The property is not necessarily for sale because it's a historical monument, and the property was owned by USC, sold to a developer who's developing the rest of the property, leaving a historical monument for us to buy. So we're going to buy it. We've already identified the source of funds, and we'll preserve that home as a cultural monument.
And the second question was, has the seller received other offers for this property?
No.
All right. We have a motion to move forward with this, Mr. Alicon?
Sure.
Second, Ms. Smith.
Okay.
Approved. Thank you so much for that. Now, status report, Coordinated Street Service Furniture Update. Can we get a status report?
Item number 5, Bureau Street Services to report response to motion, Rosendahl Smith, relative to instructing the Bureau Street Services to report on the status of siding permits for the Coordinated Street Furniture Program elements.
Wait, yeah, please report first.
Good
And we
afternoon.
have 2 public comment cards.
Sure. Lance Owishi with the Bureau Street Services. Within the last 2 weeks, we've had an additional 18 furniture sites that were approved, bringing our total up to date. Well, we only need another 180 sites at this point to be in full compliance with the contract. And so, yeah, basically we're at 300 and we've approved approximately 350 sites since January 15th.
I'm sorry, what was that?
We've approved 350 sites since January 15th through this date.
For what?
I'm sorry?
Which program?
For the Coordinated Street Furniture Program. And this is for the transit shelters, the public amenity kiosks.
That's for all of them.
Pillars, right. So
Yeah,
total we've approved. Since the last report, we've approved another 4 transit shelters. We've had another 6 public amenity kiosks approved and another 8 pillar kiosks that were approved.
Toward the end of last meeting we had, could you come on up in the back? Francois?
Francois?
Come on up.
He's still smiling.
Francois, not only was he smiling last meeting, Mr. Alicon, but he said that we have made so much progress in the last 2 months and even the last few hours that he was very excited and very positive. At which point I said, great, no more in the 11th district, no more in the 5th and the 4th. Let's put these pillars and packs in other places where there's vibrant communities that will buy those advertising and sell those products, just like we on the west side. So you were very optimistic and positive. You've now had a chance to see all this, where we're at.
Now, as Lance said, hi,
For the record.
François Gnon with CBS Deco. Just as Lance said, we have been able to secure more sites over the last 70, 80 days. We've heard you loud and clear last time that you want to find some creative solutions to make it work.
Run us over.
Yeah, to make it workable for everyone. I think, Councilman, you asked about some outside the box. We already have discussion with the city, and we have some meetings scheduled to see how we can, within the scope of the program, where the city can get pretty much all the benefits, and how can we reduce the number of advertising panels. I guess that's pretty much what you are looking for. In terms of us giving up sites straight like this, it's going to be complicated because it's the revenue that's help us generate that's the site that help us generate the revenue. But if we can work out details, it's highly possible that we can find a workable solution.
Highly possible. That's a very good word. I like that, highly possible. Because just, as you well know, there were two issues I have with this done by predecessors of mine. One is front-loading it, pillars and packs, in the 11th district, the 5th district, and the 4th district. And secondly, the monies of all this stuff is equally divided among 15 districts. And when we take the pain, we want the revenue. So I would never have negotiated Ron Deaton, God bless him. I would never have given him that power if I was running the 11th district, to be very candid with you.
Yep.
I want everything back if I'm going to put up with this kind of stuff. But anyhow, that's over, the damn days are gone by. But last night I was in Brentwood at the Brentwood Neighborhood Council. I'm very clear with my Brentwood people. We're not going to assault in this kind of a reality of San Vicente. And I know how my people in the Palisades feel as well. So I put a lot of pillars and packs, most recently in West LA, Mar Vista, Venice Del Rey, Palms, Westchester, Playa del Rey, and we put some in those other areas to the degree we have a dramatic uptick. And so we're happy that you're happy. So we look forward to you working it out. But from my standpoint, just to let you know, and I can't speak for Mr. Weiss or Mr. Labange, our cup runneth over on that. And I look for a more creative strategy.
We've heard you.
We can move forward with that. Okay, just wanted to hear from you. And if you could just pull it aside for a second, and we'll have our two constituents come up. We have the Honorable Paul Koretz, former state assemblyman, who wants to speak. And we also have a Sandy Brown, who wants to speak as well. So if I could ask Mr. Koretz.
Well, thank you, Mr. Rosendahl, and members of the council. I'm just here to object to the large number of pillars and packs that Councilmember Rosendahl referred to in the 5th district in particular, which I think was targeted the most for an outsized number of them. I think this will create a tremendous visual blight if it's implemented as it was originally discussed. And I don't know why this particular district was targeted in this way. I think it makes very little sense to, after years of trying to improve the aesthetics, particularly on Santa Monica Boulevard, and with countless hours put together on plans for various streets, just to turn around and do the opposite. I mean, you all know millions and millions of dollars were spent on Santa Monica Boulevard, including actually buying out commercial billboards. So to buy them out and then put back the blight with these commercial products in large numbers, I think, makes very little sense. You also have plans that are either existing or in process on Pico Boulevard and Westwood and Wilshire, other streets as well. And it's just absolute cross purposes to do these plans to try and limit the number of billboards and visual blight and then put it right back. And I know on Santa Monica Boulevard, there's some of the sites proposed would even put these where we've paid to landscape and would then have to rip out the landscaping to put these in. I don't know why we would implement this in a community that's worked so hard for so many years on improving the aesthetics and just turn around and foul it all up. We might as well have told them in the beginning We're going to make your streets look like hell, so don't waste your time.
I don't think Francois likes the idea that it's visual blight. I mean,
Well,
I think he considers it quite an asset.
Well, we would agree to disagree. Thank you.
Mr. Kretz, if I could ask you, we have a contractual obligation. This contract has been in place for
7 years.
7
7
years.
years.
And these specifics were incorporated into the contract. So I'm not clear on what you're suggesting that we do.
Well,
It's not, we've talked for hours, actually, in this committee about the negative impacts of this contract. Nevertheless, it's a negotiated process, and we have not prevailed upon the contractor in the way that I think any one of us would have liked to see, but I'm not clear on what exactly you're asking us to do. We can't stop the contract.
Well, are you required to put this high percentage in the 5th
a
district,
contract. It's a
or could you
binding-
put a 15th of them in the 5th
It's a
district?
legally binding contract. The contractor can put them where he wants to put them.
And there's no way to object. So he could put them every 5 feet on Santa Monica Boulevard. That can't
He's
be
not
what you're
doing
saying.
that, but I don't know exactly what there are some measurements in the thing. All I'm saying is that we're not approving a plan, and we're not even approving a contract. The contract's already in place. The item before us is how can we get ourselves out of this mess? So
Well, it would appear that it goes at cross purposes with the EIRs that have said exactly the opposite. So I don't know if any of those documents, any of the
But
plans
any-
have any legal standing, but you would think that they
Interestingly,
would.
many of the projects that you spoke of were done after the contract was approved. So, chicken or the egg. But the point is, we don't disagree with the spirit of what you're saying, but we have a legal responsibility to avoid a prevailing lawsuit. You know, I wasn't even here when the contract was authorized, but it's a contract. It's not a plan. It's not a program. It's an enforceable contract. So I'd sure like to hear your ideas on how we can avoid this. Or if you want to negotiate with the contractor, then
Hey, I'd be willing to
I think-
take a
I think-
crack
I think
at it,
we'd
but I don't
we'd all
think-
say have at it. Have at it. As a citizen,
I'd
you-
be happy to, and I don't know exactly what the limitations are in terms of what you can negotiate, but I would encourage you,
Not much.
to the extent you can, to put the fewest on Santa Monica Boulevard, where so much money was spent to remove them and to
Yeah.
make it an incredibly gorgeous boulevard that it is,
Then let me
and
let me
try to
just-
move them to locations where you would have the least visual
Let
blight.
me just say, Mr. Koretz, that nobody's been a greater champion of that than Bill Rosendahl. And
I agree, and I hope I'm giving them a little help.
Well, but you're not helping if you're not coming up with a solution. And the solution is not to say violate the contract. So I'm happy to work with you to find another solution, but we've been working on this a long time, and it's very frustrating. And like I said, nobody's been more a champion on this than Bill Rosendahl, and yet we're actually we've made a lot of progress, but it's not as if we can simply say no to a binding contract.
Well, the person you have the contract with, or the representative, is here.
Yeah.
I mean, at least I want them to hear that people are outraged. They talk to us all the time. All the neighborhood associations are outraged, and they
Well, frankly,
they
as a
probably don't
former
want to
assembly member,
implement
as a
something
former,
like that.
Council member in
West Hollywood.
in West Hollywood, you know, I think they would be happy to sit down with you and see if we can't find a better solution.
Well, I'd
And
be
frankly-
delighted. I'd be very
frankly,
delighted.
I think it's a great opportunity for you, Mr. Koretz. Francois is right back there. And if you can make it happen.
City Council, but we're not talking about that.
No, not at all. Not at all. I think it's a great opportunity because I know that Mr. Koretz is dedicated to improving the quality of life for all the people that he's represented. And Francois is there. If you can make it happen, believe me, all of us will be very, very, very much behind you.
And to add to that, on the issue of Santa Monica, this was discussed heavily at the previous meeting. The city attorney opined, and Mr. Alarcon knows I don't always agree with the city attorney opinions,
Only when he wants to.
only when I want to, that's right.
We all.
That while we may have community plans, that because of the way the charter is written, they don't override the authority of the Public Works Department when it comes to public easements. And so while we may have a plan on Santa Monica to beautify it and all that, Public Works has the right to determine on the public easements what goes there, not, and that they gave that right up essentially in this contract. So we're obligated to override basic community plans, which was a shock to 15 members of the council, I think, that we actually gave up our community plan rights.
Now, are you obligated to agree with the city attorney, or are you
No,
able
and I
to push
frequently
the
don't.
envelope on? Can you push the envelope on that issue? Because I'm not sure whether that's.
I've sued the city twice, if that means anything.
Thanks, Paul. We appreciate your comment.
Thank you.
This, by the way, will just be another report back, and I expect Francois to come back in a couple of 3 weeks with hopefully a new plan, a new design, because he's working on other angles of it. But you made it very clear that you don't want to see any more pillars or packs where you live. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Okay, Sandy.
Hi. I'm Sandy Brown, for the record, with Holmby Westwood Property Owners Association. I hope Francois is as happy with Westwood as he is with CD11. We have, I guess, put some packs and pillars and transit stops in the 5th District as well. I was actually more interested in the interpretation of the law that was cited last meeting regarding the specific plans and whether or not you can put these in areas where they say no signs, period. And I don't think that that hasn't been addressed yet, and that was really why I came to hear what the city attorney had to say about
Great,
that.
Sandy. Sit back there and then come up and we'll ask them that question.
Okay.
Okay, they're here. Okay. Carrie O'Rourke from Councilman Jack Weiss's office. Am I correct on that?
Kelly O'Rourke.
Kelly. I'm
Councilmember
sorry,
Decker.
Kelly.
No problem.
I thought it was
Good
Carrie.
afternoon, gentlemen. I'm just here to follow up on the esteemed Councilmember Smith's request for written answers to the questions submitted by Councilmember Weiss via letter, I believe 2 meetings ago,
Right.
specifically in regards to community plans, overlay zone, and especially CEQA issues. Thank you.
Very good. Appreciate you coming up there. Edward is Lewis and Gilbert Dembo. Yes, sir, Edward.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. My name is Edward Lewis. I'm a member of the Century City Homeowners Alliance, an organization that represents the 6 homeowners associations in Century City. Century City, approximately 1.5 square miles, has 1,700 homeowners in it. Under the proposed plan, we would have 1 piece of lawn furniture for every 17 families in Century City. That means when we
Lawn furniture, just by
They
the
can't
way.
hardly fit on a.
street
Pillars and
furniture,
packs.
street furniture. Pardon
You
me.
can't put 17 people on one bench.
I'd like to have lawn furniture myself, but
This
Very good.
is the scenario that we presently have. We go to our post office, we go to our mailboxes, open up the envelope from the county assessor, and are so pleased to find out that on a square foot basis, we are paying the highest taxes in the county of Los Angeles. Then, as we enter our front door and turn to the left on the corner, there will be 1 kiosk. And as we turn to the right, there will be another kiosk. They are placed on every corner on Avenue of the Stars, Empyrean Way, Galaxy. These are residential areas. There are no high-rises there. Why should we 1,700 homeowners, families, have to this burden? I mean, it's outrageous. We have them on every corner.
What kind of advertisement do they have on there?
If it's going to be anything, they haven't put them in yet. This is what the proposed plan was.
Do you think it might be for all the stuff you guys buy?
But you know, the point being though, Mr. Alarcon, you know, we moved into a residential area that had previous strict restrictions. I mean, you know, we're advised as to the size dogs that we can have. Why should we now be plagued
I'm being
with one?
facetious. The thing is, this contract was driven by money, and the
I
money,
understand that, but sir, I want to tell you something. The people in Century City are a money machine for the city of Los Angeles. We generate tremendous income for the city. It's a place where people live and work and pay tremendous amounts of taxes and revenues to the city of Los Angeles. We were supposed to be part of the city of Beverly Hills. Oh, no. The city of Los Angeles said, we want that revenue. So in exchange for that, a master plan was drawn up. Specific limitations were created where there would be no signs, no billboards, no advertising, and that's been true, you know, to this day. So I implore the members of this committee to please don't overburden us, for crying out loud. This is one on every single corner where there are no high-rises and nothing but residences.
What specifically are you asking the committee to do?
I am asking that the committee not allow any sightings of street furniture within the confines of Century City, including and not limited to Pico, Olympic, and Santa Monica Boulevards.
So you're asking us to violate the contract and allow the city to be sued?
No, I am asking that you abide by the pre-existing restrictions that were already in place long before the contract was signed.
So how do we make both of those things work?
You honor the restrictions that were already put in place.
Ignore the contract.
Pardon me?
And ignore
No, I'm not saying to ignore the contract. The city is
we can't live up to the contract.
Why do 40% of these signs have to go in the 5th Council District? Why do me and my neighbors have the luxury of having one on every corner?
Because the contract allows the contractor to do that. As I said, I wasn't here when this contract went into effect, but a contract is a contract. Now, we keep hearing the same theme. We don't want it. We don't want it.
No.
The contract's already in place. So the question is not whether or not we want it. The question is, how do we get out of it now that we're here?
I would like to present the legal argument, if I could.
Please.
Century City is a very unique place. It has the broadest avenues in the city of Los Angeles. It has fountains. It's not paid for by the city. It's paid for by the residents of Century City who work and live there. And it was a protected district at the point in time that it was formed. No advertising of any kind was permitted or allowed in the form of billboards or anything else. All signage is strictly regulated. And that was one of the precepts upon which Century City was created in the first place. Now, all of a sudden, because 30 years later, the city signs a contract, we're going to violate all of those pre-existing zoning laws? That's absurd. Absolutely absurd.
It is, but that's the fact of the matter. Unfortunately, and I said earlier, we were all surprised that opinion says we can't do that. I mean, those rules that were set up in all those community plans, the 37 community plans of the city, do not affect the placement on public works rights-of-ways. And that was a shock, believe me, to 15 of us when we found that out.
And we appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
Gilbert,
You know,
introduce yourself officially, Gilbert.
I'm Gilbert Dembo. I'm from the Palisades. I'm on the Community Council. This is a copy of the contract between the City of Los Angeles and Viacom. And it specifically says in this contract, and I'll read you on page 11, Street Furniture Task Force will review the sites to ensure conformity to city codes and ordinances. Specifically, they have to conform to specific city codes and ordinances. The specific Palisades specific plan is ordinances passed by the full city council. And we do not understand how you can pass laws and have somebody override the 15 councilmen. That is not right. And the Public Works Department has to listen to you, and if they would abide by the contract,
Win in this world.
written in their contract, then each council area and community can make sure that they abide by the ordinances, and they're not doing that. So I just don't understand.
The
Appreciate it.
city attorney has opined on this already, right?
We're going to get
We
them
haven't
up here
seen
in a
the
second.
documents yet.
We're going to get them up there in a
I
second.
mean,
again.
it's in the
We got the
contract.
big guns out.
We have a city attorney opinion, we haven't seen the documents yet, so let's.
I'll give you copies if you'd like.
No, we're talking about the city
Ma'am.
attorney.
Okay.
We want responses to your
Look,
question.
you know where I'm at on this.
Okay, I appreciate all your help, but we take this very seriously.
I know you do, the Palisades does, and so does Brentwood, my district, and I know that CD5, Century City, and a lot of CD5 feel the same way about it as well. Thank you.
I mean,
Thank you. Thank you. City attorneys, come on up for a second, would you? I know our buddy ain't here today, he's on vacation. And he's been with us since day one, of course.
Thanks, Chris, for running.
Thanks,
out on
Chris. I hope you're enjoying your
Yes.
vacation. Okay.
Well, be careful.
Good afternoon, folks. You've heard everybody speak. And the
afternoon.
biggest issue that came through from many of them is what about all of our local this, that, and the other that we've done for many, many years, that this seems to override. I don't care if it's design plans, zoning plans, specific plans, community plans, neighborhood councils, whatever we have out there that talks about quality of life, character and scale and all that. We're totally overridden by this opportunity that the city saw, and decisions were made that we now, in 2008, have to live with. So if you could react a little bit to that.
Yes, first of all, good afternoon, council members. I'm Noreen Vincent with this. Yes, I'm Noreen Vincent with the City Attorney's Office from the Reed Practice Group. And to my right is, do you want to introduce yourself?
That's Sharon.
Sharon Seedorf, Cardenas, City Attorney's Office.
And Ted
Okay.
Jordan from the General Counsel Practice Group.
Great.
First of all, I just want to let you know that our colleague, as you know, Chris Westhoff, is not available, and I believe he's been the primary one working on these issues.
Since the beginning.
Since the beginning, actually. And we just received, that is Sharon and I believe Ted, received the request for written advice from us yesterday, and we had an opportunity to meet this morning and look at it. So we're here to answer and respond to you as best we can within our understanding of the contract and the applicable laws. What I'd like to do, because there have been actually a number of issues raised today with respect to the contract and zoning and specific plans, is that in the past, at the time this contract was entered into and previous to this, basically it appears that the city's interpretation, the longstanding interpretation the city had with respect to its specific plans, was that they didn't govern the public right-of-way, that building and safety did not enforce with respect to the public right-of-way, and therefore Public Works essentially had the authority and control of the rights-of-way. We've now been asked, I guess, to revisit this issue in light of the number of issues that have been raised and addressed to this committee. And
Noreen, can I just stop on that? I
Sure.
just had to ask you a simple question on that point.
Sure.
Can Public Works put a 90-foot billboard on a easement in a public right-of-way, like on a sidewalk?
Well, I'm going to.
I've got to believe that that's impossible.
Well, I think that in looking at this and in looking at where we are, that to the extent that a specific plan did attempt to regulate the public right-of-way, and we have not had an opportunity to look at all of the specific plans. There are a lot of them out there. If there were a specific plan in place that said essentially you are prohibited from doing the following, that specific plan would control over
I can't believe
the
that
contract.
the intent of the law was to allow any use, notwithstanding all the other considerations that we. I could see if there was a public safety issue where they would have Public Works would have overriding authority, but on a superficial issue like signage, what's the public benefit that transcends all the environmental laws?
Okay.
Sharon Cedar of Cardenas again for the record. Councilman, previous to about January 8th of this year, the sign regulations were part of the building code, and the building code specifically provided that it does not apply to the public right-of-way, and that's a longstanding interpretation by the Department of Building and Safety.
So they could put a 90-foot billboard.
Previously,
Don't they have to state
the
the
sign
benefit of
ordinance,
that?
well, previously, the sign ordinance didn't apply to the public right-of-way. However, because that sign ordinance has now been moved to the zoning code, we're going to be relooking at some of these issues as to the interplay between planning and the public right-of-way.
And I think just the contract itself is a valid contract. I think at this point, given the relocation of the code, that we would look again at that issue and look at the interplay between the specific plans and the Board of Public Works and the relationship between planning and the ordinances adopted by City Council and how that would potentially supersede and essentially dictate to the Board of Public Works what it could and could not do. So I think going forward, I think that this is potentially a different issue and that we may look at it in a different manner, and that's what we're attempting to do now, is to really go back and go through the issues, go through the codes, look at it in light of the charter, the codes, the ad code, the muni code, as well as case law, and be able to respond to you if the board or the committee chooses to have us do that in writing. We're happy to do that for you. We're basically coming today to try and answer as much of your questions, as many of your questions as possible. But again, without Chris here, we are without one of our colleagues who's been the most involved in it. So basically, I guess what we're looking at is the fact that because of the city's longstanding practice and interpretation, that the specific plans out there may not contain anything that would be intended to regulate the public right-of-way, that's traditionally been something left for Public Works on a going forward basis. I think we may be revisiting that issue to see, and the specific plans may be different, and there may be some very, individual specific plans that may indeed prohibit the placement of signage.
However, I just want to point out also that, the longstanding advice is also based in part on the interpretation of our city charter, which is the, primary law.
The guiding light.
Okay.
What I'm hearing today is different than what we were told by Chris a few weeks ago. And he alluded to the charter, but I've not seen the language that he alluded to yet. I asked for that. I want to see in the charter where it says that to see if it really does prohibit. You're now saying it's policy. That's different than we were told 2 weeks ago, or 4 weeks ago, when it was.
I think we're saying that in the past that the policy, the longstanding administrative interpretation by the various city departments has been consistent with what they believe to be under the charter and the ad code required of them. So our understanding is building and safety did not attempt to regulate the public right-of-way.
Ad code is different than charter.
That's correct.
And so if it's in the charter, I want to see that language. If it's in the ad code, we can change that.
Correct.
But it was specifically stated it was in the charter.
Yeah.
There's a section in the charter that talks about the responsibilities and duties of the Board of Public Works. There's also a section that talks about the responsibilities of the Director of Planning. And I think
they conflict?
I think that we, and again, I'm responding to your question as best I can because we really haven't had a chance, the group of us, that is the land use group and the general counsel group, to come together and to really flesh this out. We understand we have a time frame, and that we're certainly happy to do that and come back to you as quickly as possible. But it would seem to me that we would attempt to the extent that we can, to harmonize the provisions of the charter. And that I believe that there is a way to do that, and it may be bringing Public Works and planning together and looking at how we can harmonize those sections.
Well, here's where I see the problem. You've only talked about going forward. You haven't talked about the enforceable contract. If this is a policy of the city, and it is not in the charter, it would seem to me that the community might have a lot of rights that have been infringed upon by an interpretation that has been espoused to be in the charter that is not. Now, it is on record that the city attorney's office, by way of Chris Restoff, has based their verbal opinions on a charter provision that they have not demonstrated evidence of. Now, if we change that, if we're saying that it is policy, then I believe the community might have a good case to make that other laws have been ignored based on a policy under the guise of being a charter provision. And we're going to find ourselves in a big box here. But the point I'm trying to make is this is real important. And we're kind of tired of verbal opinions.
Right.
And we want some hard
something in
facts.
writing. And I think, if I may, I think the contract itself is valid, and I can't see anything in looking through this that would conflict with the charter or with the specific plans.
Even billboard ordinance?
Well, I don't know if it basically talks about the fact that there's a whole process that you go through before you cite the street furniture, and that process appears to basically go through, I think it's a 10-step process to locate the signs, including involving the
Am
council.
I incorrect, but didn't the city attorney tell us that the billboard ordinance does not apply to this, when in fact these are billboards?
Sharon, do you?
Again, for the
I think they're
record,
billboards, are they not
Sharon
billboards?
Cedar of Cardenas. These are off-site signs.
Off-site
And-
signs, they're different than billboards.
At the time this contract was entered into, the sign ordinance, which was in the building code and only applied to private property, did in fact prohibit new off-site signs. However, the building code contains an exception in it so that it does not apply in the public right-of-way. Building and Safety does not issue permits for construction in the public right-of-way. That's done by the Public Works Department. Building and Safety's jurisdiction basically stops at the dividing line between public and private property. The sign ordinance being in the building code, therefore only applied to private property.
This is a real healthy discussion. Would you continue?
Well, I don't.
Candor is appreciated.
Yeah, and I spoke with Chris before I came here, so I'd like to think I'll be channeling Chris here. I know his opinion.
We'll still let you talk.
That's
That'd be
right.
exciting.
The long-standing interpretation and the role of Public Works is based on the charter. I don't have that charter in front of me, so I can't cite you a specific provision, but I know that's the basis of that long-standing interpretation. In that light, this contract is what it is, and it was done under the authority of the Public Works as the controller of the right-of-way.
Okay, colleagues, if it's okay, what I'd like to suggest is that you all come back again in a
Yes.
few weeks
We'd be happy
with
to do that.
fleshing this out, get Chris back into the loop, and let's get that discussion going. We're looking at, as I can see, 180 pillars or packs that are still needed to be in compliance. Is that correct? You all know that?
That's the number that they said earlier. I assume that's correct.
Yeah. Could I ask Francois to come up again real quickly? The cash flow we get as a city, where are we on that in the context of where this is? Does anybody know that in the city to answer this one first before I ask Francois to say anything? Anybody here from our cash flow crowd, folks who take our money? No? Okay. All right. Francois, is it right that there's 180 left to be done?
More or less, yes, that's correct.
What do you suggest? Because, we don't want to spend a lot of time trying to interpret, misinterpret, understand. We weren't here, any of us. I totally respect community strategies, overlays, designs, zoning. I mean, that's what people do all day in the character and scale neighborhood. And to hear there's a narrow moment because it's the public right of way and it's not, and blah, 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 and therefore everything they care about and think about doesn't fit within. And that's part of the frustration that the public always has with the government. And I don't blame it. I've had those frustrations even as an elected. From your perspective, are you able to find a way to distribute these in other parts of the city that could appreciate some pillars and posts where they don't have them at all, and they don't have an area like we've had on the west side or Hollywood? I mean, can you sit down and get us out of this, since you negotiated brilliantly 7 or 8 years ago a deal from your perspective, and of course the city delegated the power to you to decide where they go, which I never would have done. That is something that should be sensitive to the council districts and to the citizens within those districts. But they, in their wisdom, said, go ahead, you figure out where you want them. And we'll go support you on that. That's pretty much obviously what I'm hearing here, and the city attorneys are backing up the now interpretation of public right-of-way and all of that. Okay. So how do you get us out of this box? Because you're the one who can do it without any trouble.
Well, I mean, it's a tough question. As a general concept, I want to say that it's clear that we are providing a public service to the city for the last 7 years. And prior to us, was some other company was doing it for 20 years plus. And we provide the service in every single neighborhood. Here we are very focused on a couple of neighborhoods. But I want to say that we are providing the service in every single neighborhood for the last 7 years. That's including graffiti, trash removal. We emptied 3,000 trash cans this week alone.
And the shelters are great.
And we provide, thousands of people are using our service today just by the transit shelter alone. We have public bathrooms. Hundreds of people are using the bathrooms, this week, this day. We have 5 bathrooms in the middle of Skid Row. This is not affluent area. So we provide the service everywhere, and we're very happy to do so. We get permits to install the locations, and we take the risk, the commercial risk, to resell advertising to some advertisers. So obviously, we try to respond to the market, and the market is basically what real estate is about. It's about where are the local stores, the shopping malls, the retail. I mean, it's basic 101. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel because it's very complicated. The city is doing the same stuff with the parking meters. If you go to parking meters on some location of the city for 25 cents, you get just a couple of minutes. Some others, you get 25 minutes, 1 hour. At some location, you don't even have parking meters because they welcome people. So our concept is...
No, I'm going to change all that. We're going to go $1 an hour throughout the city, and we're going to put meters everywhere.
Okay. So, we're happy to discuss, as I said earlier, to find some compromise and some flexibility. But don't forget, we cannot lower our revenue, and then you expect the same benefits and the same cash and the same,
I understand. And I think you need to think creative. Remember, there's 15 districts, 15 in 80,
exactly.
like 12.
Exactly.
And maybe a couple of spots that haven't had any can see it as exciting. Because we don't want to spend all our energy fighting this, because we've made great progress in the last 60, 70 days. And be the law on our side or not on our side, whatever that story will end up being is a story by itself. But you're the man who can say, the city made great progress. People have jumped through hoops. People have added to your bottom line significantly in the last 2 or 3 months. Now we're asking you to take a deep breath. You had a great ride with this in terms of the decisions you've made as to who would get what and so on. And now show flexibility. Come back with us with a plan that does not assault the folks that need this sense of control over their own lives and neighborhoods that they've had for years. And hopefully you'll come back with a plan that we don't have to hash through. But we're going to ask the attorneys to come back and help us explain all that end. But maybe you'll resolve this particular issue for us between now and when we meet next. Because, 15 times, into 180 is one strategy.
Yep.
Another is to talk to some areas that in this fluid world that things have changed around in the dynamics. What you thought made the most sense 7 or 8 years ago, in Marketing 101, can have some variation and changes in the last 7 or 8 years that might suggest other locations in other districts could also benefit from a pillar and a post. That's what we're talking about.
Yes, I agree with you. We do that all the time. I mean, the location that we are looking for today are not always the same as 7 years ago.
Correct.
The city is a lively environment, and
could we ask you to come back?
Sure. I told you we're supposed to have a further discussion with the city.
And let's talk money for one more second.
Yes.
Okay. The big hammer that was put over us is lost revenue stream.
Yes.
Okay. And we pretty much closed that gap dramatically. What's left outstanding on that? And is this all prorated so we'll get that revenue, and then when we redesign where these pillars and packs will go, we'll get that revenue? Talk money for a little bit.
The contract is very clear. There is a set of equipment to install with a number of advertising panels, and the entire contract is divided in 8 different periods. So as soon as you get to period 1, you get a percentage, period 2 another percentage, period 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then when you get to the end of 8, you get the full benefit. When we 7 years ago, we thought it will take 2 years to get to P8. A couple of months ago, we were still stuck in P3. So that's why the money has been not as big as it was supposed to be, although it was almost $17 million.
Now we're at P what?
Right now, we got to be at P5.
P4,
P5, yeah.
Okay, and so we got to get up to P what?
8. So we're getting closer. I mean, like, we made so much progress in 70 days compared to the last 4 years, basically. That's what I can say that
Okay.
it's
So
a,
what
it's
I'd
a
like
fact.
you to do, is, when you see that new age here that we've just done in the last 70 days, and look at P5, we have to get to P8, we need to get another 180 in. I want you to think flexibly and out of the box. Just we could be at this for the next couple of years, questioning ourselves, and we don't need to do that anymore. And the dream would be that you find some other locations that take some of the pressure off of some of those spots, and at least I know CD5 and CD11 that are really screaming loud, community groups. I don't want lawsuits. I don't want all kinds of things happening because we've made so much progress, and you would like to finish this too.
Sure.
So can we ask you to come back in a month with a new outlay of where things might end up going that
Sure.
could solve this problem? And during that period, could you sit with the city attorney's office as well as anybody else in our city that you need to sit with, and then let us know exactly where you are in a month from now? You've heard a lot of public interaction. You've seen a lot of action to go from where we were in 70 days to where it hadn't gone in 7 years.
Yep.
Okay? And that's the spirit I'd like to leave you with going forward. Okay?
Sure.
All right, thank you. Sir?
I'm sorry, I was in discussion with the gentleman from
Thanks very
Pacific
much.
Palisades, and so I missed the last question about the revenue stream.
What do you know about it?
Basically, we were supposed to have received $25 million this year. Up to this point, over the 7 years of the contract, we received approximately $16.3 million only. So we're about $9.7 million behind where we should be at this point. Besides the loss in revenue, one of the things that
All right, but the 9.1 million you're saying, can
Right.
we make that up now at the last 70 days where we double the amount we've done?
we will not be able to recuperate that $9.7 million at this point. That'll be a loss that will basically we're going to cut our losses at this point and hopefully catch up to where we need to be at. And so in future years, the last 13 years of the contract, we hopefully realize the annual payments that are set forth in the contract schedule. But at this point, there's no way for us to recuperate that lost $9.7 million.
What about what we've just done in the last 70 days? Isn't that giving us credit and more money?
It gives us credit. It helps us to catch up where we're at, but it does not allow us to go back to recuperate those lost revenues. Because essentially the program wasn't earning those revenues for the last 7 years because of lack of
There's nothing
furniture.
we can do about that.
Correct.
Okay, so then people don't need to throw that out that we da-da-da-da. That was over
Right.
70.
We move forward from here.
Colleagues? Anything anybody else want to bring up on the subject?
Sounds like we took care of that issue.
Well, let's continue it for a month and then get a report back. And Francois, we're really looking forward to you thinking out of the box. City attorneys, we need you to answer all those questions. Okay. In writing, get Chris back, get in a huddle, come on back. No. In a month. Yeah.
A month. So we expect twice as much.
Next meeting is.
The next meeting will be May 7th, with assuming that we cancel for the 16th of this month.
That's the same day as that's the same day, I think, as a special budget meeting for budget, and both of us are on budget, so that's a problem. Well, we're trying to figure when then is, first of all. So, Mr. Chairman, we have a problem that you and I.
Francois, I need you back over here too to continue the escrow period. We want you to see that. What was that, Mr. Smith?
That date is the day that we're in the special budget session, and you and I being on budget can't obviously be at both places, so.
I'll handle it.
Bye.
Good
What's
deal.
another day,
All right.
yeah?
Bye.
Richard, take it. Go.
The Public Works Committee's regular meetings are the first and third Wednesdays of each month. Assuming that you are unable to meet on May 7th, the next regular meeting then would be May 21st.
We'll be done with the budget by then. That's what I'm checking right now. Okay, we'll see about May 21st. 7th will be in budget all day. Please.
Mr. Chair, I think the question you'd like to ask Francois, I'm Lynn Ozawa from the CLA. I think the question you'd like to ask Mr. Neon, is whether Viacom Deco or CBS Deco would be willing to extend the escrow period for another couple of months beyond April 30th.
That's right. Were you willing to do that in the spirit of all this cooperation we've been doing?
Before I answer yes or no, because we got so many new applications, is probably at the end of April, which is the cutoff date, probably the percentage is going to increase significantly.
Correct.
So the question is like, the cutoff date is April 30th. If we can expand it, I guess it's, it's not like we're opposed to it, but you realize that we have not been able to generate the revenue, so it's very difficult to give you what we have not been able to generate. But as part of a creative
approach and good faith,
it's
the spirit of the last 70 days.
It's one thing who can be part of it, but it's it's not only you need to give us a permit, but then we need to build the equipment and then we need to sell the advertising. So it's a long process.
To say yes to that, right, Len? Yeah, it's very important for us that we get beyond this.
You sound more like a politician than we do.
We're pleading with you to get beyond that April 30th and that escrow deadline. You've seen good faith last 2.5 months from what happened in the last 5-7 years. You see the issues of the politics of what we're dealing with. You see different interpretations of the policymakers' role and the law. You've heard from community groups and all that. We'd like you to continue the escrow period for how long, Len?
I think 60 days would be.
60 days.
I cannot say. I mean, we'll talk about it next week when we have meetings.
When you meet next
Yeah,
week,
yeah.
would you talk about it and get
Yes,
back to us?
sure.
We might hold an emergency meeting somehow or another.
I know it was part of your previous motion 60
Well,
days ago or so.
Yeah, well, obviously, in those 60-day period, we stepped to the plate dramatically.
Yes.
And you can really appreciate that. So now we're asking you to show some good faith and respect to the city and extending the escrow 60 days so we're not in a hammered situation on April 30th.
We'll look into it.
Look into it. Boy,
It's more that I cannot commit myself. It's too much money, and I've got to report to the
Len, you
company.
wanna respond to that?
I can't force him to do it. It would basically be a goodwill gesture on their part. The contract doesn't require him to do it. The other issue that I wanted, just for a reality check for the committee, as you know, in the past, we have tried to negotiate changes in this contract. And unless the contractor has changed significantly in their stance, I just want you to be aware that if they're going to agree to change the locations of the advertising where they want to cite it, unless Francois has changed significantly, they're going to want a reduction in revenue. And I just want you to know that that's what it's going to take. It's going to take possibly a reduction in the services from what was originally provided. So I just wanted you to be aware that those are some of the consequences that may happen. I'm just laying it out there so
Len,
you're
I
not
certainly
surprised.
appreciate that. I really appreciate what you said on that. But as we said back to you, you've seen in 70 days activity that hadn't happened in 7 years.
Yes.
So, and I know you're delighted that there's been action and activities.
Couldn't be
And we're
happier.
all very close. So I would like you to take it in the spirit of the cooperation you've been getting and make it very clear to yourselves that let's get this thing off the board, let's get it done, give us another 60 days to work this out. You come up with more creative strategies, and let's try to make it a win-win for everybody.
I'm with you.
Okay, all right, thanks. We didn't get a yes, we didn't get a no.
Definite maybe.
We definitely want the maybe to turn into a yes, okay?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so for the record, this item will be continued for 30 days pending a report back.
Correct. But it looks like the date of the next meeting.
Subject to adjustment for the next meeting date.
Do you want to say something at this point?
President, our written report would be due back to you on that date, Councilmember?
The city clerk needs that report to be submitted 7 days in advance of the meeting. Yes.
Yeah, so we can get some appreciation of what your answers are to that.
But Maureen, Francois was hoping that before we negotiate
So
with them
objection.
next week, that the city attorney would be clear on what your position is. Because that's important to our negotiation.
Okay, I think we should probably talk about that.
Okay.
Because we believe the planning and city attorneys, lawyers, all should be on the same wavelength with
Absolutely.
this, and that's a
We
key
need to
element.
be on the same page.
Of course. We're going to get a written report 7 days out before the next meeting from the city attorneys in writing explaining that. If next week when they meet, we see a breakthrough, which we're very hopeful for, we'll get out a blast to whomever. If you report to us, I don't know how you can do that without a meeting. Your discussions next week, how do we get a report on that?
No, there, or is it? I think that's between the CLA and the code.
You mean the discussions we're going to have with the contractor?
Yes.
The city attorney and I will be back with the contractor and street services to give you an update.
But that's a month from now.
Yes, to your committee. We can brief you informally, just
Let us
give
know
you
if
a...
you get that extension. on
Yeah,
the
why don't
first
you
one.
brief us informally so that we get an answer about where we're at on that? And we'll informally let the community know too as well. Okay,
there's
any
a
other
rate.
business? Motion to adjourn? So moved.
Kind of like